Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a life coach as well as a university lecturer. My vision is to make life coaching a part of every school. Today, I'm delighted to invite Kelly onto our podcast. Kelly was my student for a year in secondary school, but that was so many years ago now. She's currently an engineering consultant working in the railway industry, and she's had experience studying in different education systems. I'm really excited to hear her story, so let's welcome Kelly.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Alan. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Anything that you want to add to that intro to tell us more about you?
Not too much specifically. I guess I don't know if you have any questions to ask.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did say you studied in different education systems. Do you want to give us a little bit of background in terms of where you've studied?
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, and then during primary school, I went to Hong Kong to study until I was probably just before GCSEs, which is the
Right.
UK system, just
Yeah.
before year 10.
Yeah.
Came
Yeah.
back, and then here I am, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I went off to study mechanical engineering at uni, and then now I'm an engineering consultant.
Yeah. 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 I'm very curious. Like, so how do you feel that's affected you so far? Like in terms of like obviously growing up in the UK and then moving to Hong Kong for a few years
hmm
and then come back again. Like any how would you describe that experience?
Personally, it was quite challenging. The education
Mm,
system was quite different. I felt
mm,
like in Hong Kong it was very, very robotic, but in
mm,
the UK it was more the understanding the application
mm.
of subjects, particularly for sciences.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was the most challenging part, and especially writing in a particular way in an exam is still quite challenging.
Mm, mm,
So that
mm,
was
mm,
the biggest challenge. But when I got to university, interesting enough, it was easier because the way
mm.
I explained things probably I improved a lot.
Yeah.
Also, understanding what the question's asking,
Yeah.
I actually did much better at uni compared to
Right.
school,
Yeah. Yeah.
GCSEs and A levels.
Sure. Sure. How was primary school like that? So you kind of had a bit of both. So you had primary in UK, and then you had a bit of primary school in Hong Kong, right, as well.
Yeah, correct. I don't remember too much, but because in when I went to Hong Kong, I went to a local school. So
Mm,
growing up in the UK, well, the typical um Chinese Chinese school on a Saturday. I only
mm,
had like
mm,
an
mm, mm, mm,
hour
mm,
each
mm.
week. So growing up in the UK is quite difficult practicing Cantonese or
Yeah.
Mandarin or whichever
Mm-hmm.
languages.
Mm-hmm.
But in Hong Kong, I went to a local school, so it was mainly everything was taught in Cantonese
Yeah.
so only English subject was taught in English.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
very challenging doing
I
doing
can imagine.
maths
Yeah.
in Chinese. I remember sitting next to usually is the naughty students sit next to the teacher, but I had to sit next to the teacher because they had to translate it one by one just to
Oh,
make sure I
wow.
understand what
Wow.
the question's asking and then also translating it in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was a challenge, but I think it did me good. I can now speak Cantonese quite fluently.
Yeah.
Writing's a bit rusty, but
Mm,
it's great as a great skill.
yeah.
So it's just by chance that I went to a local school, and then of course I went
Yeah.
to um a, a secondary school where they taught everything in English except
Yeah.
Chinese. So
Mm, mm, mm,
that was
mm,
my
sure.
experience.
I'm curious, like obviously you moved to Hong Kong for a few years, did a few years in secondary school. Was there a particular reason why you moved back to UK? Or like was it a personal choice or was it more of a family decision kind of thing?
Bit of both, I think. I think the
Mm.
opportunities in the UK are a bit bigger, especially in engineering.
Ah, right.
Yeah, so I think that was probably the main reason.
So you already knew you wanted to become an engineer even back when you were like in secondary school?
Not particularly, but I think in terms of science and STEM, at the time I thought probably it's a bit better to come back to the UK.
Right.
And also different universities, and they have a lot of like research in STEM and
Mm,
etc. So I knew I was going down the science route, but
mm,
engineering was quite late on, probably year 12. Year
mm,
12,
mm,
that's when I knew I wanted to do something related to physics and maths.
mm,
So I did quite well in those two subjects. So engineering was kind of the natural progression for myself. So
mm.
yeah.
I'm curious, when you first got back to UK, how did that feel? Like, did you feel like the experience in Hong Kong had a positive impact on you? Was it like, oh, wait, I've done a lot of things, for example, in maths, right, in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
which maybe you hadn't been taught in UK, or was it the reverse? Was it like, oh, wait, my English is not as good as I thought compared to other people around me?
Um, well, in terms of, I think the most thing I struggle with was answering the questions in the way, quote unquote,
Like,
how the exam boards
right.
sort of mark questions, because I understood
Mm.
all the like maths is like kind of there's no gray area, it's either correct or wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in sciences sometimes even answering the question, even I wrote it in the way where technically is correct, but I didn't include certain keywords or particular
Mm,
phrasing, then I would lose the mark. So I think
mm,
at that time I was really confused, but maybe the way I was taught in Hong Kong is like, okay, these are the answers, these are the model answers, just follow that, you
mm,
get the marks. But in the UK, it's slightly
mm.
different, is actually understanding what
Right,
you're trying
right.
to apply, the
Yeah.
way you write your questions. So that was the biggest challenge I had at the time. But
How
now it is
about
much better.
how about fitting in and stuff, like kind of socially? How's that?
Um, I think it was okay. I didn't really struggle too much,
Yeah, yeah.
because I think well, I studied in like a primary school in the UK, so I kind of like had that vague memory of like what it was
Mm,
like. So it
mm,
didn't throw me off too much. And I went to a local school, like in the borough,
mm.
within the borough. So it wasn't too bad. I
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
enjoyed it. Like I think it shaped me as a person. So
Yeah,
everyone was
yeah,
really
sure.
friendly. So it didn't have
Sure.
too much like too many challenges. So it was
One
all
more
right. I was
question
like
on your background. Like, do you feel it's quite a big one? Do you feel more English or Chinese?
it's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit of both.
Mm. Give us some
I
numbers. You're a numbers person. Like, what percent
oh
English would you say you are, and what percent Chinese?
I oh this is a very tricky question.
That's why I ask it, right?
A very good question. I think it depends on the situation really. I think like 50-50, because
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I still have both side values from both sides, so I
Yeah.
can't really say exactly how much, but I think the way of thinking and the way I approach things probably more towards the British side of things, like
Mm,
having an
mm,
open
mm.
mindset,
Yeah.
um, having an understanding of, acceptance, being more
Yep.
compassionate and etc. Not
Mm, mm.
to the typical like, you know, um, tiger parent Chinese sort of way, but also like having those values like, respect and whatnot. So
Yeah, sure.
it's a bit of both really. So yeah,
Yeah,
50-50 I'd say.
yeah. Interesting answer. Yeah, thank you for that. So normally the main part of the podcast is where you can pick a topic related to schooling, education that you wanted to dig deeper into. Was there a particular area that you wanted to talk about?
Um, Not particularly, but I'd maybe don't know what you would suggest.
Let's end the podcast here then. No, no, I'm kidding. No, not well, normally I leave it to the guests so that I mean we just go along with the flow of whatever you choose. But I mean one thing would we've kind of already talked a little bit about already was the transitions, right? But I guess
Yeah.
another thing might be because you seem so passionate about engineering. Right now you're working as an engineering consultant, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the outside, like probably a stereotypical view is that it's quite a boys or male dominated industry, right?
Yeah, correct. It's
Do you
still we
want to
still
talk
have
a little bit more about that? Like, how did that feel maybe for you? Was it something that affected you, for example?
I don't think it affected me too much. Even well, I think it all probably started noticing a bit more when it's like when you go to A levels and you pick your. I did 3 sciences, triple
Yep.
science and maths, and of course,
Mm.
no physics class is only like then let's say there's 10 students, there's only
Yep.
1 or 2 female
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I didn't really notice. Well, maybe because I'm just used to it, or maybe I
Mm.
am don't really get affected by whether you're a female
Yeah.
or
Mm.
you're a
Mm.
male or whichever.
Mm.
Um, I don't really get phased by that, and
Okay.
I think throughout the school years, being able to be empowered by my teachers, my
Mm.
parents, being able to speak up for yourself, and
Mm.
also
Mm. Mm.
try and get um so I don't think that really bothered me too much. But of course, there are challenges when there was a particular example. When I did a project at uni, I noticed that there was something wrong on the engineering
Okay.
design, and
Yep.
the engineer didn't listen to me, and I had to ask
Oh.
my other male colleague to tell
Mm.
this
Mm.
person to change it. So I
Mm.
think that
Mm.
was the most challenging part, when someone don't think
Mm.
your point of view is valid,
Yep.
but
Yep.
in reality it is valid because it was incorrect. So they have to change the
Mm.
design. So that was the most challenging part. But being in a male dominated industry is not too big of an issue. That's why I'm here to
Right.
try and become a role model for someone else who might want to be in engineering.
Yeah,
And
that's a
also
great point. I mean, did you have any role models, would you say, like when you were studying at that school, or as you're going through kind of the different phases of learning about engineering, was there someone in particular that you looked up to?
um not particularly, but I've been inspired by various different people that I've come across, like from school,
Yeah, yeah.
in Hong Kong, and from like my family and
Mm,
etc. I think it's more the transferable skills, not necessarily,
mm, mm.
yeah, transferable skills. Having that resilience, being able to
Mm,
understand what you want. Well, we're probably still finding out what we all want to do, but at that time, what fancy, what
mm.
you want to do. And also just meeting different people, getting perspectives from other people to see
Mhm, 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 mhm.
what's the best route for yourself. But
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, my parents were very supportive, and I think a lot of people know myself as quite sporty in
Mm,
school, and knowing a lot of
mm.
like play a lot of music. I still play the piano, still
Yep.
trying to do my diplomas. They probably wouldn't have thought that I would become an engineer, but um,
You mean your
yeah.
parents?
Yeah, so they were quite surprised when I said I want to study engineering. The classic,
Mm,
yeah, they just thought, oh, why don't you do something else? Like, you're a female. What do you mean you do engineering? But I think,
mm, mm,
but
mm.
they had an open mind and said, whatever you enjoy, you think you can achieve, do well, go for
Yeah.
it.
Mm,
So
mm. That's
that's
nice to
their
hear
perspective.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's their perspective on things. But they never really were strict when I was younger, in terms of like academics
Mm.
and etc.
Right,
So
right,
they
sure.
were said, as long as you think it's the right path for you, you do whatever you need to do to achieve
Yeah, yeah.
your qualifications. And
I mean, you kind of touched on it before, but I just wanted to go a bit deeper on just when exactly did you know that you wanted to go on this engineering path? Because you told me that you chose your three sciences and maths at that time, then obviously that will be the year of the GCSEs when you're choosing your A-level
uh,
subjects,
yeah, I think it's
right?
middle of year
Year 11, yeah.
11,
So did you
something
kind
like
of
that.
already know then, or it was more of a just, oh, it's a possibility?
At the time it was a possibility when I'm picking my A levels, because
Yep.
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I thought, oh, you know what,
Mm,
let's just pick the sciences and maths,
mm,
to see where it can take, because it's quite broad, like STEM subject you could do. Let's
yep.
say, I don't know,
Yep.
3 sciences and math you could do. So, like let's say as an example,
Mm.
like biochemistry, pharmacy,
Mm.
medicine, engineering, and etc. So I thought it would give me a wide range of subjects to
Yep.
choose when I had to pick my university choices.
Mm.
And I think once I got into A levels, I went to the University of Birmingham summer schools. I went to,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's a year 12 summer school in the
Yep.
summer. Also went to different like university taster sessions, and
Yep.
I really enjoyed it,
Mm,
and I did quite well in physics and math. So I thought, you know what, I can do this. Like engineering
mm,
is a subject to do. And then
mm.
I still, even picking engineering, there's so many different fields you can go into. I
Yeah.
picked mechanical engineering because it was the most broad, wide range.
Mm.
Even after that, I can go into anything. And
Yep.
even now going to rail, it was by chance I got into rail. So I didn't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
study
yeah.
railway engineering particularly, but it
Mm.
was just by chance that I landed in the railway industry.
I'm just curious about the summer schools. Like, was that something that promoted to you by the school, or was it more something that you actively sought out yourself, or your parents said, "Oh, maybe you could do this"?
I think at the time it was the head of sixth form, literally in an
Mm,
assembly said, "Oh, there is this summer school at
yeah,
this university, and lots of different universities do it as well.
yeah,
If you want to fill in the form, here you go, go for it." So it was
yeah.
also by
No,
chance. I didn't know.
yeah, it sounds great because I never had this opportunity, or maybe I just wasn't listening during assemblies. Um,
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't. I think it's a bit of a challenge. Sometimes being able to outreach to schools and
mm,
being able to encourage students to go to summer schools and etc. Um, it's yeah, the information don't get spread that quickly, and also just need to be able
yeah.
to just the right time, the right place, and also hearing conversations from other
Yep,
people, other students. So it is
yep.
it's challenging, not only schools and universities as well, especially when it
Mm.
comes to applying to like internships and grad schemes.
Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking that it's good that you were so proactive in taking this opportunity because if you think about it, if you hadn't done that, then without that experience, then maybe you like when you came to choose your university subjects, you'll be still like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. Maybe something related to science, possibly, right? But
Yeah.
that,
If you don't ask, you don't get
yeah,
right. So
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
true. I had another question about your extracurricular activities because
Yeah.
you did mention that you play the piano and you're quite
Yeah.
sporty. How do
hmm
you kind of balance this? Like, so was it something that was difficult to balance between spending time, for example? I mean, learning piano, I know takes a lot of time
Yeah.
and money.
So yeah, and money as well. So when I was younger, I from memory, I just only focused on swimming and piano.
Yeah. I
So
remember
I
you were
think I
so good
kind
at swimming. Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of lacked in, I didn't really focus too much on like actually studying, but that was between like year seven and year nine.
Okay.
But and then when I came back to the UK and I thought I think I need to kind of like push back a little bit on my extracurricular activity. I actually need to focus on
Mm,
studies because the grades at GCSE A levels will affect my future. So I
yep.
had to cut down a little bit on swimming, and but I
Mm,
kept piano. I think when I came back to the UK, I probably stopped swimming until I went back to
mm,
university. Went to university. I did life saving at uni, but
mm,
yeah, piano I kept on, but during A levels it was quite challenging. Coming back to the challenging of like being able to answer the questions how the exam board would like to
mm.
students to have those keywords and etc. So I only kept piano at the time. But I think you time management is a key skill, is a transferable
Mm.
skill for students or even when you graduate, even at work. So
True.
I think it comes with practice, and my method might not suit anyone else. So everyone's time management is very different. So as an
Mm.
example, people some colleagues might like to go to the gym in the morning,
Yep.
or some people might like go after work or whichever time that suits them.
Yeah.
So
True.
it's about balance. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
my perspective on it. It
Yep.
depends
Just one
what's the
more.
priority at the time.
True, of course. Like learning how to prioritize is so important, right?
Yeah.
I just have one more question about engineering. Like, just if you had to give advice to, let's say, think about some high school students now thinking about going into a career of engineering, right? What advice would you have for them or their teachers who are kind of guiding them?
Um, I guess one advice is if you if you don't ask, you don't get. And if you're particularly interested in engineering, maybe try and, you know, take as many opportunities, have a Google around,
Mm.
see what opportunities at universities, summer schools, let's say,
Mm.
or even a university masterclass about engineering, just to get yourself, you know, in that get yourself in there, have a chat with people, lecturers, to see
Mm.
what it's like to work in engineering, or even speak to people like myself, reach
Mm, mm,
out
mm.
if you're interested in engineering. Um, so I think speak to more people, network.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the way to go.
Yeah, I'll just say to anyone listening to this podcast, if you're interested in connecting with Kelly, just do it for me. So you have my email address in the show notes and stuff. Anyway, are you ready to move on to the quick fire questions?
Yeah, go on then.
So, how did teachers describe you back then?
Um, Probably someone who's quite sporty, who loves
Mm.
playing the piano, and probably quite chatty and smiley all the time.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I think that's pretty much how I would describe you too. What do you think schools or teachers should do more of to help students?
Listening to the students, to their
Mm.
needs. And I understand teachers, have a lot of students to look after, but there
Yeah,
might be particular ones who need more support, and listening to their needs and trying to accommodate for them would be
yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. I think that's so powerful. How about doing less of?
Reading off the PowerPoint.
Yeah, yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, yeah. I
Ah,
have nothing more to say on that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Um,
yeah.
what was the most helpful tool or activity that you think really helped you learn? So you can focus it very much on maths, physics, or STEM subjects if you want to, or just in general, like maybe something that made you suddenly think, oh yeah, I can learn, or I'm good at studying kind of thing.
Um, I think this was quite generic, but when someone's given a presentation, I think this one you mentioned it when I was in school, when I was in your year,
Okay.
about like paying attention in presentations and paying attention when someone's speaking, because
Mm,
it's quite daunting standing in front of a crowd. Someone,
mm,
they're delivering a topic that is related to maybe what you're studying, and actually paying attention, you might actually learn something from that. And
mm,
being
mm, mm,
respectful, paying
mm, mm,
attention is important,
mm,
because one day you will be on stage and you will see people who aren't paying attention, and it's quite
mm,
upsetting. So
mm.
that's the
Oh,
one thing, paying attention. So that's what you taught me.
yeah. I was gonna say I'm glad you remember something from all those years
Yeah,
ago. Probably the
yeah.
only thing. But anyway, moving on. Do you have any funny or strange or scary, touching moments from your school life that you can share?
I guess a touching moment is keeping in touch with your school friends. I still
Yeah,
have
yeah.
keep in touch with my friends from school in Hong Kong,
Mm.
even my primary school friend in Hong Kong. So
Do you want to give them a
keep
shout out here
uh,
or
Michelle,
not?
Sharon, and Edith. Shout out to you girlies. But I'm really grateful to still keep in touch with the friends that I have,
Yeah.
and make the most of it, I say.
Sure. And what's one question you have for me?
What is the most challenging aspect you have in the field of work that you do?
That's a difficult question because I do so many different things now. So right now I'm
Well,
a
you can pick
lecturer,
one.
I'm
Yes,
a
you can pick one.
podcaster, I'm a life coach. If we talk about podcasting, so like right now,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we're doing it right now. You said the most difficult thing. Actually, I find it quite easy if I'm honest. I guess the one thing is I don't really pressure myself to like I don't have a target. It's not like I
yeah.
want to have 100,000 listeners, so I
Hmm.
don't have too much pressure on myself. But I guess mm, I'm not answering your question very well. I'm just thinking that there aren't really that many big challenges for me to making a podcast. Well, there is a challenge which is very minor, which is more the technical side of it. You know how
Hmm.
like adding effects to it and stuff. So
Yeah,
that takes a
that
bit
is a
of
skill.
time. It takes a bit of time, and sometimes I'm like, ugh, does it really matter if I don't cut this part out? But sometimes I'm like, I think I would say, yeah. To answer the question, maybe dealing with perfectionism is quite a challenge sometimes,
Yeah,
particularly where like editing and stuff.
I
You're always like, oh,
agree.
you can just add a little bit more, you can add a bit more, and then you're like, yeah. So I try my best to not edit too much afterwards, to not overly spend too much time on it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you for the question. And I just have a couple more for you. One would
Yeah.
be if you could go back and change one thing about how you approach school, what might you change?
Have an open mind of the various different subjects. Personally, I quite like the generalist approach, knowing a bit about everything. And I wish I paid a bit more attention in, let's say, geography, history, or even like business. If there was a business course at GCSEs, I wish I kind of took that. Even at uni, I wish I had more exposure outside of engineering as well, because when it comes to a workplace, I personally think it's better to have a well-rounded experience and understanding of things, especially coming to solve a problem.
Sure. And one final question would be, any teachers you remember vividly for good or bad reasons? If it's for bad reasons, you don't have to mention their actual names.
I'd say the most memorable is probably yourself.
I mean, that's why I invited you to come here to say this.
No, I think the most memorable experience was in school when you were teaching us. It was the English in Hong Kong. You're doing the English only day, English only week, where we only can speak English.
Yes. I remember that. Yeah.
But that was a good thing. That was a really good way of practicing, especially in Hong Kong. Like mainly we speak Cantonese, but having that opportunity to force ourselves to practice English, so I think it's really good, impactful for the students as well. So I think that's the most memorable stuff. But in terms of each teacher has their own teaching style, so it just depends on whether it works for yourself or not, and how as a student, how you can adapt.
Sure. And while you were saying that, just your face just like back in like that year came up like, oh, it's amazing. You were so tanned back then.
I know, because I used to swim outdoors all the time, but in the UK, we don't get any sun.
Well, it's a sunny day today while we're recording, so make the most of it, right? But anyway, Kelly, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. Particularly, I think on the two aspects that you really brought up, like the transitions that you've been through. I think it's really nice to see how you've appreciated each part of your own learning journey. And it's really interesting to see that you find that you, like when I asked you, are you more English or Chinese? It's right now it seems like it's 50-50. So I think to me that's super interesting. But also you're a bit of a trailblazer in the engineering world too. Like I'm hoping more and more students who want to do engineering and maybe think, oh, it's a male dominated industry, will want to join because they see more and more female representatives in the industry. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all those things.
Thank you so much for having me.
Something I really appreciate about Kelly, apart from her bubbly personality, is her proactive mindset towards challenges. From the different transitions she's had in her schooling to proactively participating in summer school to confirm her interest in engineering, and not being afraid to speak up in a male-dominated industry when something was wrong, even though she knew she might not be listened to in the same way as her male colleagues. I hope you enjoyed listening to Kelly's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.